Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here. As Josh said, I'm Nick Wilding. I'm the General Manager of Resilia, cyber resilience best practice at AXELOS. If you've not heard of AXELOS before, we're a joint venture between the UK government and Capita. We own and nurture global best practice methodologies and frameworks. You may well have heard of ITIL, Prince 2. We're responsible for those around the world, used by millions of practitioners in over 150 countries. And I started at AXELOS nearly 3 years ago now to design, launch, and now manage this new cyber resilience best practice, which we called Resilia. As Josh said, to start today's conference, we wanted to get us all involved in an open discussion as to how boardrooms can more effectively steer their way through the challenges in balancing the incredible opportunities they have in operating in the digital world and in adopting all these fantastic new digital technologies with the systemic cyber risks that come with those same technologies. We want to provide some insight and ideas as to how you can better protect your hard-won reputations, your competitive advantage, and your operational stability. How do we move from awareness, which is where so many organisations are, to informed and intelligent and cost-effective action against one of the biggest risks we now all face? And to help us in that, I'm delighted to welcome our pool of experts this morning. They're all peers of yours. They all have real experience and probably a few scars of managing cyber resilience in the boardroom, of communicating the cyber risks effectively to the boardroom, and in guiding many executive teams and boards through the challenges they face. Sadly, all too often after an attack has happened, when it's all too late. It's been said there are two types of CEO, those that know they're being hacked and those that don't. The harsh reality is that no matter how much time, effort, money, technology you throw at being more resilient and being more secure from attacks, you can never be bulletproof. No one is immune from that. The digital world has just opened up some fantastic opportunities for all our organisations to get closer to our customers, to expand more quickly, to internationalise, to work more effectively with suppliers and partners. But as I say, it comes with these additional new risks, unseen risks for many. Investment in cyber technologies to try and combat those risks continues to rise. But at the same time, the scale, the scope, and the impact of cyber attacks also continues to grow. There appears to be something missing in our response. The truth is the vast majority of successful cyber attacks succeed because of human error. The unwitting actions of anyone in an organisation, from the boardroom to the front line. So we need to acknowledge that resilience is fundamentally as much about our people and our behaviours as it is about technology. Resilience is also all about risk management. You can't protect everything that you have. So where do you focus your time and resources for greatest return and greatest effect? How does the boardroom plan for resilience and not react to crisis? There are all too many examples of companies not being ready for the inevitable and sleepwalking into a situation where they're fighting to protect their very hard-won reputations. Many have lost that fight, and many more are really struggling to understand what good resilience looks like for their organisation. So enough for me for the time being. I'd like now to introduce the panel, get them to introduce themselves to all of you, and to open up our discussion by asking them not only to introduce themselves, but also to present their very short perspective on the key challenges boards typically face in this critical balance between the opportunities that come with the digital world and the risks, the cyber risks that we face as well. After that, I'll then ask the panel a couple of questions myself to get the debate going, and then we'll open it to the floor. So, Andrew, do you want to start?
Thank you very much. I'm Andrew Rogoyski from CGI. So for those of you that haven't come across CGI, we're a large IT services company. We're about 65,000 people globally, strong in the UK, South Midlands and Scotland. And I have the privilege of running the CGI's UK cybersecurity unit, which is one of the UK's largest cyber teams. We serve a whole variety of different market sectors, enough of the pitch. I also had the privilege about 4 years ago of spending a couple of years in Cabinet Office in the Office of Cybersecurity, which was an interesting time for an industrial technologist to go into what was the civil service organisation, what is. I was reminded yesterday as Philip Hammond announced the latest, the third iteration of the National Cybersecurity Strategy, how things have moved on. Not only in terms of commitment, I was very struck by the strong language used in that strategy. I don't know whether people have had a chance to have a look at it yet, but there's a lot of assertions and a huge breadth of commitment. Whether government can really meet all of that, I would question. It was quite a surprise. And I was particularly struck by the critical language applied to industry, applied to businesses, saying that essentially we haven't done enough, and I recognise that picture. I think one of the things that's changed over the last 3-4 years is the level of awareness has gone up, but the level of commitment to invest has not necessarily gone up that much. And at senior level within organisations, they are still, gross generalisation, still treating it as an IT issue, not as a business issue, still treating it as a grudge purchase instead of a cost of doing business, still looking at it as something that is something that you have to spend a compliance spend rather than something that can be an enabler for what you want to do as a business. And I think we really need to start changing the face of that argument. Earlier this year, we did a piece of research which is freely available to all. We have a report available on the stand there, so I recommend you pick up a copy or get the URL for it. We call it the UK PLC at Risk, which was really looking at this question: do boards in the UK understand the nature of cyber risk? How are they thinking about it? Do they have the language of challenge? So the point that came up in the video, senior individuals at board level understand the language of law, they understand the language of finance, but do they understand the language of security and digital and the use of information that frankly all of their companies depend on now? We found that something like 38% of organisations polled thought they would be breached this year in 2016, which was quite a high number, I thought, but actually a remarkably honest number, showed some awareness of what was going on. They estimated the average cost to them would be over £1 million for every breach. But they only looked at cyber on the board agenda every few months. We looked at how often it was examined at the board agenda, and it wasn't frequent. There were a few organisations that looked at it more frequently, and it was sector dependent. There was less and less confidence in the level of advice they were getting at board level, so were they making the right decisions informed by the right people? So again, echoing that video that was put up earlier. And 2/3 of them were committed to changing the knowledge, the level of advice they were getting, either from external sources or building up their own internal teams. So there is this growth in awareness and realisation that they need to spend more on putting the right people in the right place and thinking of it differently. And I think I'll stop there. Hand on.
Hi, Andy Bates, Public Sector CTO from Verizon. I'm very tempted to say just what he said and then kind of move on. That was a brilliant intro. So I think to answer Nick's question, first of all, if I were to say to any board, in terms of cyber security and IT security, I think the problem is 80% people and 20% technology. So I work for a company who sells cyber defence technology. So I'm saying actually we're the least helpful people in the room to try and solve this problem. It's generally thought that some of the biggest weaknesses in cyber security are the employees. So again, I think back to Nick's question, that in terms of the board conversation, a lot of people have always thought that I bought a firewall, the green light's on, so I must be safe. And then, as Andrew's just said, but then I know I'm going to be attacked because the people out there who are attacking, whether they're teenagers in bedrooms, which is what happened with TalkTalk, or whether they're foreign intelligence services, there's a lot of people trying to attack you, and it only takes one person to click on one link to let the whole thing go horribly wrong. So, yeah, from our point of view, Verizon, you probably never heard of us, probably don't know how to pronounce the name. Happy if you say Verizon. I'll be a little bit unhappy if you say Verizon. So we are a cyber defence company. We've also got a report on our stand. Feel free to go and take a look at that. It may scare you a little bit, and I think one of the challenges going forward in the next few years with boards is not really to scare everybody and to get into common sense. There's a whole lot of common sense things that can be done in the world of cyber. So I guess to finish, to quote my wife, Sarah Bates, she said she de-geeked me before we got married. So I think we need to de-geek this whole cyber security thing. We need to try not to talk in TLAs, which are 3-letter abbreviations, by the way. We need to just get to common sense language, because all of your boards, I've spoken to some people this morning who make either boilers or do packaging, those kind of things. If we talk to you in our language, then it's just not going to make any sense. We, the industry, and all the industry are here on the panel, we need to learn how to talk business language, which is why we're here with the CBI today. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. My name's Ian Davies. I've sat on 50 boards over the last 25 years, sometimes chairing them, sometimes being senior independent director and chairing the audit committee. I started with no knowledge of cybersecurity, but I did send my first email in 1985. So I've been fascinated with how that has developed over the last 30 years. I don't think it's the employees who are the most risk to companies. I think it's the directors. The directors on boards who do not understand the threats or the opportunities that this new digital world presents. And they need to set the tone. They need to ensure that they understand what the CTOs are telling them, what the IT geeks are trying to tell them about the systems and how it works. But they also need to embrace the way that millennials are looking at the world. You can't turn back the clock now and remove everybody's mobile phone. The companies that have got bring your own device policies can't say you can't use them anymore. That's not going to happen. So we have to find a different way to protect the information, which is now more and more public. One critical error that companies have made is in making acquisitions and not changing the legacy systems that they've inherited. If you've got 4 or 5 different systems, you multiply exponentially the difficulties you have in controlling it. So the message that I want to discuss with you today is how do we get boards talking to the people in their companies more effectively in a shared language. Very often the people at the front line in a business know what's wrong with it, but they haven't got a way of conveying it to those at the top. I'll pause at that point. Ian.
Good morning. Ian Andrews. I'm a non-executive director from what is now known as NHS Digital. And what I'm going to say applies directly to each and every one of you, because we are in effect the Office of National Statistics for health and social care in England. And that, we don't just do that, we also run the national carrier systems that hold all of the patient confidential information on all of you in a secure and safe state, or not. It's a very distributed structure. There are tens of thousands of organizations which hold your data. 8,000 GP practices, 222 clinical commissioning groups, 470 trusts and similar providers, 152 local government organizations, all independently accountable and independently self-governing. One of the things that concerns me, and now, thankfully, all of the Department of Health and Government, is how we ensure that that structure is resilient. And a year or so ago, a report was commissioned from the National Data Guardian on the information security standards that should apply across all this hugely diverse and distributed network. And that report was published in July, and we're awaiting the government's response to the public consultation. The report recommended that there should be a basic set of standards and tools structured around people, process, technology, people, leadership, boards. But until we have across these tens of thousands of organisations, boards understanding the nature of the risks that they face with your data, you are going to be at risk. And literally, in the last 36 hours, we've seen a hospital in Lincolnshire, widely reported in the media, taken offline as a result of an incident. Thankfully, it was local, it was their responsibility, they're the data controller, it was their internet gateway, but it took them offline for 2 days. And we're going to see that increasingly. Could I just ask a question? How many board members are here? You don't count. Picked up a report this morning, and this is a survey of privacy and IT specialists in the United States. 2/3 of them said their board didn't understand the problem. 3/4 of them said the board wouldn't take responsibility if there was an incident. I rest my case.
Thank you, Ian. Barrie Millett. I help boards and businesses deliver resilience in a challenging world. I've spent a number of years working for companies such as GE and E.ON, and am now setting up my own brand, Albany Pearl, to help organisations become resilient. And I'm also an international advisor for the Cyber Rescue Alliance, and feel proud that we're in Leicestershire. I'm also the chair of the Leicestershire Police and Crime Commissioner and Chief Constable's Joint Audit Risk and Assurance Panel. Lucky in the last 8 years to have focused on securing both strategically and operationally elements of the critical national infrastructure. So you'd hope that boards and leadership teams would be focused on ensuring that they are resilient, and also working with various government agencies as well to make sure that we've got a framework in place that enables information sharing and teams to be able to operate effectively. And with the new National Cyber Security Centre being set up in London, that's another fantastic step forward. However, I think most organisations need to fully understand that that centre fundamentally will be focusing on either the essential services that businesses provide or the critical national infrastructure. They are, even with the announcement of the new budget available yesterday, they will not have the resources to be able to help what I'd call normal businesses. Nick, you asked the question around what challenges have I seen over the years that boards are facing. I think fundamentally there's a lack of real discussion, risk discussion on cyber in the boards. There's a lack of understanding what assurance they need to see to make sure that they fully manage the risks for that organisation. And I don't feel the enriched debate in that arena. And I truly believe as the Internet of Things continues to develop, as there is a push for organisations to become more lean and effective, as there's a push to outsource some of the essential services that your organisations utilise, there's no joined up thinking and clear assurance as to whose responsibility it is and how can they measure that assurance. So there's a journey that boards and senior execs continue to be on, but there's also a need to make sure that they bring their people along that journey with them as well. It can't be done in isolation. And I've seen all too often great strategic position, and in reality, when it comes to try and deliver that strategy operationally, there's a real disconnect. And I would say probably know your suppliers and what they're doing and what risks they're managing is crucial now and will become even more crucial going forward. But also engage with your customers as well. As businesses develop technology that links into the Internet of Things, we're making things easier for customers, we're giving them more transparency, giving them control of the services that you're providing. We've got to take them on the journey with you as well. It's really, really important. Within Cyber Rescue Alliance, we've got a lot of statistics and guides that are freely available on our website as well for you to access. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you all. Barry, one thing that you said there just reminded me of something. I used to work for BA Systems, and I organised and hosted a boardroom dinner about 4 or 5 years ago with the chief exec of BA Systems and with the CBI. We attracted, there's about 15 senior business leaders around the table, chief execs, managing directors, FDs. Right at the end of the dinner, Ian King, chief exec of BA Systems, said, "Can I ask for a show of hands, how many of you discuss health and safety at your monthly board meetings?" And everybody put their hand up. And the next question was, how many discuss cyber in your monthly board meetings? And only one of them put their hand up. And there are a number of organisations from the critical national infrastructure around that table who, you would naturally assume this would be top of their agenda. But perhaps it was 3 or 4 years ago, a long time ago. Anyway, on that theme, we've got a little challenge here because both Ians have sat next to each other, so I'm going to have to be a little bit more targeted in my attack. Ian Andrews, so do you see, what evidence do you see that boards are now maturing beyond just awareness and seeing cyber just as a technology issue first and foremost, rather than a much more broader, multidisciplinary challenge that they face?
I think they're beginning to understand it, but they're not understanding what it means and what they have to do about it and what their responsibility is. I think the private sector is beginning to understand it because they can see the consequences, whether it's TalkTalk or Sony or whatever. And as the introductory speaker was saying, this isn't just about the cost of putting it right. That's in the small change. It's the impact on reputation, on share value, on just huge, massive and loss of business that comes out of that. The public sector is only just in the starting blocks, frankly. But I think what the thing is that my perception of boards is that they understand that they ought to be worrying about it, but it's really scary. And they still think about this is them, the board, making other people do it. Where it's not. It's actually about what it means for the members of the board. Members of the board, as we heard, the whales, they're high profile, they're easy to get information on, easy to attack. They want to go for the latest gadgets. This is about not do as we say, but do as we do. I think that we're beginning to see boards, and I absolutely take the point about health and safety. I don't think many boards are actually. They don't have cyber as a standing item on their boards. NHS Digital does. Across health and social care, they don't. There are beacons of excellence. Interesting, very, very often organisations where the senior information risk owner or the chief information security officer have a background in the airline industry where they understand risk management and learning from experience. It's all about, as I say, it's about them rather than us. The three or four things that I think would make a real difference. Actually, the board understanding this is a huge, huge business risk. It's the biggest business risk any organisation faces today. you've got to have people who are dedicated to it. It's got to be, it's not just an add-on to the day job. It's not in hospitals something you give to the senior nurse. You need to have real skills and knowledge and understanding. And you need to have an accountable executive who is actually responsible to the board for making this work. And the board members need to know what questions to ask. Having it as a standing item on the board agenda, absolutely. Because that gets focus. It sends the message to the organisation that this is important to the board. And what I would also say is don't just think about, quote, cybersecurity. It's information security. It's about people. It's about physical security. It's about, yes, the internet, which brings a whole new dimension. But think about it in terms of where is our critical area? Where is our critical information? What do we need to protect? We don't need to protect everything in the same way. We're making judgments about what we invest in protecting ourselves in terms of resilience against the risk to business of the losses that will come downstream if we don't. And also responsible boards think about what happens when that breach happens. They have resilience plans, they have recovery plans, they practice them, they rehearse them. It's too late, and you saw with TalkTalk that when they had their crisis, they had not thought about how to manage it. You don't know in the early stages of a crisis what's going on. You really don't. But getting up, managing it, because that will force the board into the public eye. That will put you in the Dido Harding position. If I just add a couple of other points. I think in boards, non-executive directors have a hugely, hugely important role to play. And if you don't have a non-executive director on your board who has a background in this area, then start looking. Because the whole purpose of a non-executive is to hold the executives to account. I was, in a previous life, I was the chairman of the then Serious Organised Crime Agency, now the National Crime Agency. And we were talking to a big household name international company based in the UK. And we had 2 hours with their executive team. And at the end of it, the chief executive wrote me a letter and he said, that was the most valuable 2 hours I've spent. Because I've never thought about this before. So my non-executives have been asleep on the job. Why have they not been challenging me? Why have they not been saying these are the things that we should be doing? I also got a message from the IT and security departments who said we've never had 2 hours with our chief executive before. That was fantastic. So know when to ask for advice, know what to do, know what to put in place. Just a little footnote on the 1.9 million in the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which I'm sure you've all read. It's the third occasion the 1.9 billion has been announced as an investment by the previous Chancellor in November last year, in the autumn statement last year, and again ahead of the autumn statement this year. One of the most interesting pieces of information in that report, apart from the fact it's quite strong on rhetoric, and it says that the government can't do this, this is all about everybody else. This is about business, it's about individuals. That 1 in 5, or rather less than 1 in 5, companies surveyed and reported in this report have done any training for their staff in cybersecurity in the last year. And coming back to what affects all of you in health and social care, by 2020, every one of you and the other 55 million in England will have the ability to access, read and upload data online into your medical records. That's 55 million potential areas of vulnerability. Are you aware of your responsibilities when you go online to make that appointment or look at that data on you?
Thank you, Ian. Andrew, you've got some?
Yeah, just to add a quick footnote to that. I think there's potentially a wider structural issue. And this is becoming very apparent in some of the work that we're doing, and I know other people are doing on the digital agenda. So the big thing in IT services is finishing off that digital revolution. And it's becoming very apparent that people of, how can I do this without being ageist, people of my sort of age and above who hold senior positions, who may hold board positions in organizations, are largely, don't have the instinct to understand that their businesses have become digital under their feet. When they started their business, when they started working in business 30-something years ago, none of this stuff existed. They grew up with a telephone, bits of paper, a secretary. It was a completely different set of processes. They understood how to run a bank, how to run a utility, how to run a small business. And as time has gone on, so many of parts of that have now been digitalized. You know, now their organizations are dependent on customers who access over the internet, use mobile access, they may use cloud services for their payroll, for their invoicing and so on. Largely they're unaware of what that really feels like, what that really means. And as a result, we find that actually having a digital conversation about how you really take the organization on is sometimes quite difficult, quite challenging, because they kind of don't get it. And the other is that they don't realize that inherent vulnerability to all of that digital infrastructure that their businesses now sit upon, simply because they haven't grown up with it. So it is maybe a generational thing, and I'm not going to say the millennials are going to sort it all out, but it is something that is really quite structural, that needs effort on the part of senior business leaders to understand what has happened to their businesses and how to protect their businesses, as well as how to really capitalize on what has happened.
Thanks, Andrew. Something that's been mentioned a few times is the need for collaboration across the organisation. This isn't just IT. And the seeming lack of a common language, and not talking about this from a business perspective to help the board better understand the risk and to actually take informed action. Barrie, can I ask you, I know you've had a lot of experience actually reporting to boards in good times and during crises as well. How effective, and what sort of evidence do you see that that language is changing, and the skills and the abilities of the CISO, the CIO in reporting up to the board around these risks and the nature of those risks? Do you see that improving?
It is improving, Nick, but there's still a long way to go. You know, most organisations are very imaginative in developing their businesses, but they lose that imagination into transferring that into, so what are the threats and risks that could face the organisation? And historically, I'm not a technical person, but historically those IT-related risks have always been communicated by IT teams, IT directors, CISOs, whatever you want to call it, using acronyms and using lots of language that really doesn't hit the heart of a board. And I think some of the reason why those teams have not been getting the time at the table was because the boards just didn't really understand that language and thought it was a waste of time, so that the time on the board agenda has gone down. What I'm starting to see now, and how I've seen businesses become more effective in debating this issue, is for those that are the custodians of IT resilience, those that are custodians of managing risks for the business, are starting to link back first the threats, risks and vulnerabilities directly into the business plan. So really fundamentally understanding the business plan for that organisation, both now and also the developing strategy, and then working out, one, how what they're doing can be an enabler for that business to deliver that plan and be successful in delivering the strategy, but then also being challenging in their articulation of how they see some of those threats probably derailing that business strategy in a business language, rather than in the high technological language that has historically been used. And as I say, that I feel has been one of the reasons why it hasn't got the time it needs to have at the table. But Nick, it's getting better. Lots of people are learning to talk a different language, and there is appetite really in understanding how they can start to be a little bit more imaginative in trying to get it discussed effectively.
Andrew, you need to say
Yeah,
something?
I think it's really important to understand that this is a two-way language process.
Yep.
That it's not just about learning how to speak to the boards, but it's also about the boards understanding what's going on. So it's two-way. And I was really struck by an interesting conversation I had with Dido Harding, Chief Executive of TalkTalk, who most people will know had a very large and public breach about a year ago. And it was just something, it wasn't the whole story, it was just something she said when she was trying to make a decision about restoring some of the services, bringing them back online. She was talking to her IT guys who'd done the appropriate remediation, and she wanted to understand what her risk was in saying, yes, let's stand the services back up. And the IT guys were sort of expecting to have to make a binary decision. So they were expecting to say yes or no. She wanted an assessment with different things so she could make the decision. And it was quite an interesting insight that the IT guys were second guessing what the boss wanted, and the boss was actually trying to make a decision that actually, you know, was closer to what the IT guys were looking at. And it really illustrated to me that the need to bring those kind of communications together, to not try and second guess what the boss wants, and to not try to make an effort to understand what the IT guys' decision-making process is.
I think that's a really important point. It's about relationship building. You know, we all talk about building stakeholder relationships, whether it's inside the business or outside. What you don't want to be doing is trying to understand what somebody's saying in their own mind in the thick of an issue. It's really, really important that that two-way relationship is built up in business as usual, so that you're not second-guessing what people are thinking when you're having to respond to an incident.
Ian.
I think coming out of that, what's really, really important, and reinforcing both points, this is not a binary issue. It does require boards to make judgments on the balance of risk. And it does require those boards to have a really good think through, roots up review of what their risk appetite is in a particular area. Just in the context of NHS Digital, ministers don't want to risk a breach of any sort. Fine. Encase it in concrete, straight in the sea. But then we can't access it, we can't share it. We've got to have access to data, to information, to deliver all the efficiencies in care and so on that we've got to do. And fine. In that case, you've got to recognise that if you're doing that, you will suffer attacks, you will suffer breaches. How do you minimise the risk of those breaches and managing the consequences when they occur? And it's having that debate so that the board is taking a conscious, informed debate about what to do.
Great.
And absolutely right, you know, the IT person is not there to tell you what to do. You've got to make sure your board is sufficiently informed to reach that judgment of risk. One of the words I really hate is cyber security, because for anyone over 35, and I think it probably includes all of us,
Unfortunately, I've just had a hard life.
this is really scary. This is Cybermen. This is hide behind the sofa because they're coming on Doctor Who. The sad thing is that to get money in government, you have to use the cyber word. This is about information security. It's about, as I said before, it's about your people. It's about your access control systems. You've got a new dimension, a third dimension, which you have to factor into that as well. But don't just think about internet and technology challenge, because then you'll lose sight of all the others. I might just go back to that household name international company I talked about. I mean, the CEO said to me, we could not live without our .com identity. And that company takes a standing item at every board meeting looking at their cyber security position. If you don't, you're being irresponsible in my view.
Andy?
Well, it probably sounds a bit trite. I know we discussed putting cyber on the agenda, and I was going to use the Cyberman joke as well, so thanks for getting there first. But I bet if I phone up a major retailer without naming the names of major retailers in the UK, I bet they've always got security or loss or shrinkage on their agenda. It's what people obsess about. So I think we should remember cyber crime is really just crime. It's a different way of committing crime. If I'd be very vernacular, it's just another way of nicking stuff, frankly. So I think there's lots of board agendas where people do talk about security, theft, loss, shrinkage, whether you're a retailer, whether you're a bank. So maybe we just roll the whole cyber conversation into that, because that's what people are worried about. The stakes are higher now. You can steal a lot more stuff. It can be stolen by somebody outside the country rather than somebody in your shop or in your bank. But you know, maybe again we need to change that language, that we all talk your language, we all use the languages that boards use today, because it's not about getting it on the agenda, it's about having a conversation. So maybe maybe that's just a different technique to get it out there.
Sure.